I am very aware that you don't have to know all of the intricacies about XML in order to use Office 2010 or Office 2007. But what I also know after about 16 or more years of training is that if I give people a little bit of background information so they can understand the why behind what they're doing, then they can make better choices. Because there's never just one choice. There are options, and we have to know what those options entail in order to make good choices. So let's do a little bit of XML 101, if you will. And of course, that would start off with what is XML and what does it stand for? It stands for Extensible Markup Language. The X, of course, from extensible and M and L from markup language. It was actually introduced in the 1990s by Microsoft, and it's a markup language like HTML that uses tags. Many of you are going to be familiar with HTML, or the language of web pages for the most part, and the thought of a tag is simply a marker, if you will, that defines what something is. For HTML, it defines formatting. For example, a B tag represents make this bold, or a U tag could be underlined, or an I tag for italics. XML is going to be a little bit different, but the concept is exactly the same. Both of these are flexible, universal formats for structured documents. What XML does is it actually stores data as plain text, and then it uses the tags to identify what the data is, not necessarily how it's formatted. HTML uses the formatting tags. XML actually identifies what the data is. The tags in XML are customized, and this enables you to define it, to transmit it, to validate it, and then to interpret what the data is, not only in one application, but between applications. And that's where the true power comes in. The question most people have then is, okay, I get that, but why do we care? Well, you care because it's a common, universal data format. And if you think a little bit deeper, maybe what you know about data is that sometimes it can be tab delimited, and you can open tab delimited data in a variety of applications. The same thing is true here. Because it's universal, it makes it flexible. That means that it can be read by various applications, various platforms, and various browsers. So we can certainly use it in Office 2010 on a Windows environment using Internet Explorer 8, we all know that, but it actually goes way beyond that. Any application that can read XML can use it, and it can go across platforms, including Linux and the Mac. We can also use something called a standard transformation. Now, I know that gets a little bit technical, but basically it means that we can very simply extract and repurpose the content to be used in a variety of different places in a variety of different ways. In addition, XML files are usually smaller, sometimes up to 75% smaller than the old binary version. That means that they're going to be easier to store, they're going to be easier to transmit, for example, over the internet or in email, and all of those make sense with the way we use computers and technology today. Another thing that's interesting is that macro code is not supported by default, so there are fewer security issues. If you're moving these files back and forth across firewalls between locations or between people, you're probably not going to run into issues. Now, there is an option in Office to save them that are macro code enabled, and we'll talk about that. But the default is that XML is pretty safe and secure, and so it doesn't run into issues traveling across networks. Since the container is actually part of what the formatting is, and the XML data is something different, if the container itself gets corrupted, that's the formatting part, the data is just fine. So this means that in the unusual circumstance that a file does get corrupted, we probably can recover the data, even though you may have to add some formatting to it. And all of this really just comes about because we need to transition from the old binary formats, the .doc and .ppt that we no longer need to use because they don't really meet the new demands of the way we work. They were great 20 or 30 years ago, but fact is, technology has changed and the way we work has changed. Therefore, the file format has to change as well. So how did XML evolve as far as Microsoft Office is concerned? Well, XML support was first introduced in Excel in Office 2000. It was known as Open XML. XML for Word was added in Office 2002 or Office XP. Microsoft announced it was going to go ahead and co-sponsored standardization of the new format with ECMA International in 2005. And that format, the standardized format, is called Office Open XML, sometimes abbreviated as OOXML. Word and Excel XML support continued into Office 2003, And then almost a decade later, we can see that XML became the default file format beginning in Office 2007. So people who say XML is new are actually a little bit mistaken. Because it's not new, it's been around for quite a while, it just wasn't brought to the forefront. We actually get to see it in 2007 and 2010 as the default file format brought to the forefront. So how do we work and what do we care about XML in Office 2007 and 2010? Well, it's important to note that both of these versions still support the older binary formats. So you can still work with the old PowerPoint, Excel, and Word formats that you've always been used to. But it is very easy to upgrade or to convert the binary files to the XML format. Converting them actually allows you to have new functionality. This is going to be the Office 2007 and 2010 features that are so phenomenal. Do you have to have the new features? Well, no. But just like we use a word processor now instead of an old manual typewriter, we want to make sure that we're able to use all of the functionality that Office 2010 allows us to have. And the only way to do that is to make sure we convert our documents into the new format. XML formats, of course, have different file name extensions, and that's usually the first thing that people actually notice. A couple of general things to know is that if you see an X, that designates that it's XML. If you see an M, that actually designates that it's a macro-enabled XML file. Remember we said that by default, XML doesn't include the macro language. But when we can save it as macro-enabled, then it does. Kind of a happy medium between the two. So the examples that we'll see most often is that we're moving from .doc, .xls, .ppt, and .mdb, which are Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Access files in the binary format, to basically just adding an X to the end. That lets us know that docx is the XML format of a Word document, and so forth. That's a very quick, brief overview of XML 101 because you don't have to know all of the intricacies about it. There certainly is a lot more to know, but this is what you need to know to make good choices when you get started using the new versions of Office.